Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. A title has come to me, which is Making Sense of Creaturehood. And so I wanted to kind of dive into, and I've made some notes here. And pretty much I wanted to share Mr. Within's commentary and pretty much how I see the value of a concept of the creature and how it has inspired man to be fascinated towards fantasy. You see, many things in evolution I can comprehend, but the urge to create limbs as a strategy of genetics and biology was always fascinating. And I consider that it was as if first there was an objective separation. That means we separated as evolutionary creatures from the earth. We're like, whoa, am I walking on this earth? It's as if we were walking on ourselves. We were unconscious. Then we became conscious that we are the walker. Then the walker became conscious of the inner space, and then the subjective evolution began. So I find that when we look at the evolution of human beings, it has kind of been an oscillation between a self, a sense of self, and a space before that self comes in. Like if you notice, if you pay attention, of course, the room that you go in, the Japanese have a saying, they say the man is the room he enters, or the man is the room he is in. And what does that mean? This is not referring to just external rooms. Sometimes a person could be in a sad room behind their eyes, and in front of their eyes, they could be in the happiest room possible. And sometimes they could be in the saddest room, and in the room inside, they could be behind their eyes, they could be very happy. For me, what we call imagination in the mainstream, which I feel is an outdated way of acknowledging it, um, pretty much the handling of the nation of images behind your eyes that has unknown borders is what I want to discuss. And I want to kind of discuss not just how this evolutionary creature became a sense of a creature to itself, defined itself, just like it wore clothes, we identified ourselves ideologically. So I feel our species is, in some sense, still language worshiping, and we're playing language masquerade, costume games. I mean, when you look at society, of course, there's a level of self consciousness to human beings to maintain their individual dimension. Okay, so for example, people care for their appearance, for their presence, for their moment in world, but it is, how can I tell you? It's like sometimes I find the moment is the self moving the world, and then sometimes it is the world moving the self. Now, you see, once this creature became aware of the subjective realm, it had to keep creating itself in the subjective realm. And so it's kind of like, imagine the inspiration of light, and when the conscious waking state appeared, that was a state where man had conscious access to that which it seemed beyond reality. When you look at life, it's every person's sense of self and character to some degree is grounded as like a being in the world. Now, in ancient mythology, the world was alive. So the world was actually seen as a creature before there was the appearance of a creature, you know. And so, what is left yet to happen is when a self becomes a world. And I find in the 6th century, we made the self into a world, or another way of saying, um, we made man into a god by creating the concept of God, which is superior to man. And whether we created it or it was a revelatory creation, in the manifest world of language, at some point it was written, do you know? So for me, it's like we've experienced our sense of self as a creature. Now we have experienced our sense of world as a creature, and we are realizing we have also experienced the world as the world and the self as the self. So that would in the self as a creature. So I would say it would be like, how would I explain the notes I've made here? Pretty much, okay. There was this idea that civilization was made on a giant turtle's back. Like that turtle probably was like, "What is this on my back? Oh, it's human civilization." Yeah. I don't know. I've kind of constantly looked at what the human design is and is doing, and it's in some sense inspired by abstract conceptions to move in reality. And when we look at fantasy, when we want to make sense of creaturehood, we have to wonder what it is and why it's fascinating. Many times when I come across something new, I don't first assume I know it. I become fascinated by it. I let myself be a fool of a classroom that I'm attending for the first time. You know, this world of ours is becoming more and more artificial. And what it means is people are not artificial beings, so they're going to rebel. So what's going to happen is there's going to be this kind of limbo state of artificial archetypal freedom where people are behaving decently, but through senses of self that is not them. Maybe that'll happen in the next 30 years. I don't know. So, anyways, an oscillation between self and space. I like the idea of a designer, and so I like to wonder about how one, if man could reach the level of the gods, how would he design a world? If the other way of asking the question, if man was a god, is like certain religious circles feel that's disrespectful. I'll tell you, let's think about it. If man became, that means reach the level or try attempted to create a world. So that's a better way of saying, let's say if the human being attempted to create a world and then create a self. Literally, people in Silicon Valley are trying to make conscious AI or are trying to make AI conscious. So just like putting furniture in a room, we must consider space to the room. And space, we can have a definition for it that perhaps is uncommon, is defined by what enters it, as if it requires, it's like, say, if a tree falls in a forest and no one's there to see it, did the tree fall? with the same level of inquiry where, like, okay, if there's no consciousness, there's no space. So it's as if the cool thing is we are finding ourselves as something somewhere. You know, this part we have a vast amount of certainty about that we're something and we're somewhere. Okay? Now, the whole thing is that our whole civilization is based on this idea that language is our symbol attribution. So on some level, if an extraterrestrial comes by, if we don't move towards an experiential sense of knowing, we're just limited to ideological knowing, then it's as if we cannot even understand. Do you know what I mean? It's as if we focus the educational system more on ideologies than direct experiences and advancing the skill of the person, which has to do with the vision of the world they see. I am telling you, there's this very profound story of these two frogs. And these two frogs fall into this hole. And they're constantly trying to jump out. And the other frogs in Frogville suddenly notice this and they all come and make a circle around the hole. And instead of cheering them, instead of encouraging these frogs to get out of their inefficiency, these frogs that are circling around, kind of like Gladiator Coliseum, you know, it's as if they're all just showering hatred on these frogs. And they're like, you can't do it. Dead frog walking. There's no way you're going to get out of here. Don't even try. You know, just go in the corner, you know. It's like, die already. It's like, it's like savage. And so you see suddenly in the story, one of the frogs, as both frogs are attempting to get out, one of the frogs goes to the corner. He stops attempting, closes his eyes, and slowly becomes lifeless, as if he's dead, as if he died inside. And so you see the other frog is still going. And the crowd is so savage, you know, that Frogville crowd. And the Frogville crowd is like, yo, you know, don't even try. Go sit there beside your buddy or something. You know, and they're all shouting. And so they see every time they shout more, this frog actually is strangely is getting more energetic and is getting closer to jumping. And then they're like, guys, let's amp the hate, and they amp the hate, and suddenly they reach a point where they see like Neo from the Matrix, the frog jumps out, you know? And so in that moment, when the frog jumps out, that frog, the only way he managed to get out really was because that frog was deaf. And not per se deaf. Well, how the story goes is the frog is deaf, and instead of translating the hatred, he thinks people are cheering him on, so he's self inspiring himself out of a situation. And that's the thing that I think we got to start treating ourselves as minds. And minds, you know, like if you can say it's as if we are considering the mind to be a projection from an organ, we see, for example, the stomach is there to digest. So, what is the brain here for to digest or to consume or to use? And you see, it is your attention. Your attention is the gate to paradise and to any other state of mind that one can consider. Really, the evolution of creaturehood has brought us back into the unknown. And if you consider history to be like this sine wave, that the peaks and troughs are kind of like the unknown and the known. And we are, believe it or not, in the middle. And the Buddha was like, go the middle way, go the middle way. And people were like, why, man? Why go the middle way? And he's like, because there's chaos and order are simultaneously witnessed. They're no longer the person is going about based on a sort of morality that is two dimensions trying to fit into one. So the person can't tell if they're good or bad. If your attention goes towards the bad, you can say you're bad. If your attention goes towards the good, you're good. And now, how are things being known good and bad? Here's the fascinating part. They're codependent. Language is held in a dualistic dimension. Study duality and you'll understand language. Your mind will open up to, just like how there's antimatter. If we consider a subject to be the material of the mind, it's as if we are wondering about the anti, rather than the anti object, we're wondering about the anti subject. And the anti-subject is the ability of duality. So you see, in regards to your objective realm, the dualism is pretty much space and stuff in space. Or another way of saying that is light or no light. That's the duality of the objective realm. But when you look at the subjective realm, that duality is between self-projecting world and world projecting self. And I'm telling you, moments, it's we are a combination of both. It's as if our free will is in a symbiosis with the will of nature. And we are natural beings, like we're not robots talking right now. When we're natural beings, that means we're still connected to the earth. And so when you go look at back in the day of fantasy, you can say it's like fantasy writers have the same momentum, you can say, as science fiction writers, but they are working at a time where the technology was magic, not like digital. When you see the inspiration for Lord of the Rings, for um, Game of Thrones, like I believe there was a story that even Tolkien was like under his table at the age of 14 in UK when his house was being bombed, and that's where Frodo was born actually. Not in the Shire, he was born there. When you study reality, you come down to its filters. I believe it was Lewis Carroll who said something like, there's something like as if the guy heard something so interesting and it was like the idea poured into his mind like water going through a sieve. Something of that imagery. So I don't know, when we study creaturehood, we come to the biological body. When we study the biological body, we come to the unknown mind. That means after we have studied the known body, we come to the unknown mind, and then once the person realizes, just like the unknown mind and the known body are in the space of the soul, or you can say in awareness, all the dualisms connected to your sense of self are in your awareness. So when you do any sort of self-awareness practice or whatever, just your conscious attention goes to trying to maintain presence before personality. I'm telling you, there's a trust in your presence that not only heals the person, it's kind of like we are a fish out of water when we are functioning through egoic constructs. And when we go out of that egoic construct, we heal in the field. And I'm telling you, even in many traditions. In Buddhism, there was this concept of the Pure Lands. And the Pure Lands was a state of mind which was like a heavenly dimensions where Buddhas hanged out. Yeah. All right. Let me see what I can do in this creative session. Pretty much, guys, how the snowball began moving, how the snowball effect caused the snowball to become a bigger snowball, how the bigger the snowball became, the bigger the fall became. But because the bigger the fall became, the bigger the hope became. And because the bigger the hope became, man began to conclude a sort of relationship. So imagine you on a piece of paper, you write the word self, and then you write the word world. Okay? And then draw two arrows, from the self. One is write, for example, known, and then write the unknown. And do this for both of them. So as if the world has a known dimension, and the world has a known dimension and an unknown dimension, and so does the self. Now check this out. We look at the self and the known dimension, and then draw from the known arrow. That means from the self, the known arrow, draw another arrow from the known, and write their personality. Okay? Now, go from self, from world, do you know? We go to the known of the world, and the known of the world write physical reality. Or you can write matter. Just write matter. So anybody who's following what I'm saying, um, from the word world, the arrow you've drawn, which is to the known, from the known, draw an arrow to matter. So now we've kind of seen that what we know of the self is our personality. What we know of the world is, you can say, the matter, the material universe. Now we see the self is unknown, and we see the world is unknown. Now, check this out, guys. From the unknown of the world, draw an arrow and write dark energy. Okay? Dark energy. Now, think for the self, the unknown, it is a question mark. Write a question mark there. Okay? Now, that question mark, you can say a question mark is the perfect definition for the soul. It's like in the dictionary, the definition of the soul should just be question mark. Or in brackets, look into the mirror. So look into the mirror of your mind. So, anyways, the world is unknown, and so we say that's like dark energy, dark matter, black holes, you know? And so, for the self, we see that the unknown, even though I said draw a question mark, really, if we were to examine that, right, that's kind of where my talks are focused on. Now, the unknown self, I feel, this is my main point, guys, that the mystery of the world and the mystery of the self are the same mystery. And that mystery takes us to an attributeless field where our all attribute filled particles are hovering in. What that means is our species, for the first time, has made contact with unknown intelligent space, and it has made contact with that unknown intelligent space behind its eyes. And this is why writing is valuable. This is why communicating has a value. Because behind our eyes, there are many worlds that deserve to be seen. I remember the logos telling me kind of like this inner intuitive kind of sense of knowing that behind every person's eyes, there are libraries. And you choose to give it out. And you know how those libraries are expressed? Those libraries are expressed by your care and importance. That means the easiest way for someone to align their life, wherever you are in the world, just get a piece of paper, you know, and write on the top, write importance. Okay? Just the word importance. And I want you to just, as many times you want, just circle that word. Okay? Then drop the pen on the piece of paper and just for a second ask yourself if this moment was realized to be temporary, what would be the most important things in your life? And those when I say important, it doesn't mean future. You have to forget about the future. You got to think about right now. You know, right now, what is important for you? And that, whenever you find that value and you trust it, an archetype will emerge. So we can say sometimes engaging something activates a field of intelligence or a creative rhythm. That rhythm is the unknown. So it's like, you see, it's like kind of cool. It's as if before our species has made extraterrestrial contact, we are making contact with unfamiliar inner space and how we are appearing in our own inner space. You know, I had this idea, of course, in a lot of my recent talks, I've been speaking about Civilization 2.0, and right now I'm trying to somehow um trying to efficiently handle so I can kind of put my attention full time on this, you know, because I kind of feel like I'm like this. How can I tell you, this miner who's been mining for jewels and suddenly has found a portal instead of a jewel. And the portal is something that you can't take back, but it's as if, like, whoa, phones exist, we can record. So what I mean by that is that I'm kind of realizing if the species evolves beyond acknowledging itself as a subject, it would have to be something in the range of collective experience, rhythmically moving. So it's as if we're going to be 8 billion minds and our surfboard on the waves of the unknown is going to be a new ethos and new language. I have given this metaphor before that the mind is like a sword and a shield and should be treated as such, and it should be treated as if it can become a tool in an instant. And for me, I noticed that concentration is the secret of skill. And concentration comes down to single pointedness. And once you're comfortable with a sort of endless, like a timeless, this is the perfect way to say it, a sort of timeless, single pointed presence of attention, then you will become acquainted with the void. So you see, it's like people think that it's like, let me tell you, it's like there's cycles of being acquainted with your subjective realm, as if, wow, I had a dream, wow, I visualized something cool. But then there are ways of being acknowledged where it's as if in your inner space you actually confront no form. So when you can be comfortable, that's why I use the word presence. When you can be comfortable as a presence, so in other words, the self's unknown dimension is something that's here, but it's unknown. And that's the fascination of it. I feel life is strangely too integrated. And really, the digital war against nature is simply that of moving together or in a fragmented way moving. Pretty much, it's as if technology wants the world to be more multidimensional, but nature wants it to just be what it is. The reason I called it the subjective realms is because when you acknowledge it as a realm, it explains a lot of things. And what that means is when you, for example, see an angry person or a neurotic person, what are you seeing? You're seeing someone who thinks that their inner realm is the only room. And in those times, what that person needs is to calm down. Do you know? So what that means is it's like when you see the Hulk, when he got angry, it's as if he became uncontrollable. Like all the dude needed to do was meditate. You know, that moment where sound becomes meaning is, I find, an enlightening moment. When we can observe objective phenomena, and just like how you don't have an opinion on like a cup in a cupboard, you know, similarly, one can have a state of mind where they even look at the moment and they can see that before they do anything, it is active. And this is honestly my greatest discovery of intelligence, that it is a sort of rhythmic effort, inner vision oriented thing. That means it's like when something is important for you, really important, it reaches a certain threshold of importance, honesty comes in. When honesty comes in, the person is not resisting anything. When the person isn't resisting everything, the world starts slowly moving. So the person begins experiencing as if, like, imagine all the thoughts in your head are like an alphabet, and you begin imagining it's as if the universe is speaking through ideas behind your eyes to you as you. You know, and and when I say the universe, I mean I gotta speak about it somehow, but really it goes beyond the language threshold, which is a concept I've created which can really make people feel relaxed. So you see, the atheist, you know, the atheist is something like this, okay? Where I've seen so many theists and atheists, or people with, abstract considerations upon reality, you know, argue with secular materialists, and it becomes this thing where it's as if the person says something abstract, and the atheist is like, that sounds fantasy, you know, and like slams the statement down. So I wondered. This is why this is kind of my, you know, life's effort, and I feel it's one of the fruits of this Mr. Within project I've done, where it's this kind of I'm going to soon publish it. It's the language threshold. This concept, this concept of the language threshold, it is a breath of fresh air, because it means that when the person is explaining something and the explanation starts off from the objective reality, and then in order to continue it will eventually become subjective. That means if you ask anybody questions repetitively for a long while, eventually their attention may become just whatever they imagine they feel is the answer, you know. I can say that it's like this thing that, imagine the theist starts explaining certain views that he has, certain cultural benefits, but when he goes to the existential value of a religious ideology, then it's as if the atheist is listening, and it's like, okay, let me see, when is he going to say it? And so what happens is, if the theist had the realization that the experience was of his inner realm, his or her inner realm, what it would mean is that it is beyond the language threshold. That means someone asks you, what was skydiving like? You're like, it's beyond the language threshold. Like, what do you want me to tell you? My inner feeling of it? So that's the thing. You see, I am kind of realizing the sophistication of our species is dependent on how advanced it acknowledges the space it's in. And so the world is either alive or not. That's pretty much it. It's like when Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead and man killed him, Mr. Within is going to say the world is dead and virtual reality killed it and simulations killed it. Digital simulations killed it, you know? And that's the thing. That's the thing that if we are not life sensitive, we won't care enough for this life thing. But humanity is based on certain foundational pillars. Let me tell you what's going to happen. There's an evolution of archetypal identity. There's two ways that the concept of extraterrestrial or whatever we consider beyond the atmosphere potentially can be useful. One way, there is something out there that will find us, therefore, that's an endless savior complex, hope for extraterrestrial contact. And then there is another dynamic where one can say it is that man realizes he is the extraterrestrial. That means, believe it or not, it's this process of unearthly phenomena being pulled by the earth and taking form and then kind of inevitably leaving. You see, I kind of found it strange, I found this wheel of karma concept frightening when I was thinking about its parallels with the concept of gravity. And I thought, what is it if we have, for example, let's say, I mean, like right now, a person can't see Wi Fi waves, but it doesn't mean they exist. So our visual sensory perception that we want proofs of the world is a very tiny range of what we see from reality and even optical illusions. Pretty much everything a person learns, it's they you if you technically see it, there's a gravitation towards the self. And so if the karma concept of karma was an endless loop for a transmigrating soul, one can say that it can be the gravitation of the existential phenomena. So it sometimes I remember I in one of my science fiction works I tapped into such an abstract idea where it was as if the center of the earth was in another dimension. So it's as if human beings, once they dug towards the center of the earth, they actually found another universe. They didn't find the center. You know, there are mysteries all around us. The human species, its banner should be mystery. Because mystery is a concept that cannot be owned. It cannot become a mask of any sort, you know. I feel like diving into a quote tunnel, which is a segment of these shows, into quotes of someone either a person in history or a theme in history. And today I feel I'm gonna dive into Voltaire's quotes. And so I'll read it for you. Francois Marie Arouet, known by his nom de plume Voltaire, was a French Enlightenment writer, historian, and philosopher famous for his wit, his criticism of Christianity, especially the Roman Catholic Church, as well as his advocacy of freedom of speech. freedom of religion and separation of church and state. So I'm going to read some of his quotes for you to get a sense of how his mind, how Voltaire saw the world, pretty much how his eyes were open to the world. Voltaire says, weakness on both sides is, as we know, the motto of all quarrels. Voltaire says, of all religions, the Christian should of course inspire the most tolerance, but until now, Christians have been the most intolerant of all men. Voltaire says, I should like to lie at your feet and die in your arms. Voltaire says, every man is guilty of all the good he did not do. Voltaire says, meditation is the dissolution of thoughts and eternal. Okay, I'm definitely sure this is not Voltaire, but okay, I'll read it anyways. This quote is ascribed to Voltaire. Meditation is the dissolution of thoughts and eternal awareness or pure consciousness without objectification, knowing without thinking, merging finitude in infinity. I 100% doubt Voltaire said that. But if he did, I'd be surprised, Voltaire says, when he to whom one speaks does not understand, when he to whom one speaks does not understand, and he who speaks himself does not understand, that is metaphysics. Yeah, I mean, sure. He's saying it's like an eternal confusion, but I feel what it is it's an unknown space where attention must be its own finding. Voltaire says the art of medicine consists in amusing the patient while nature cures the disease. Voltaire says by appreciation we make excellence in others our own property. That's an incredible and helpful view for the advancement of civilization. That I remember saying that civilization 2.0, whatever you see now is civilization 1.0, let's say. Civilization 2.0 will be a civilization that anyways, guys, to continue. Voltaire says, judge a man by his questions rather than his answers. Voltaire says, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And that's true, guys, because ideological worship happens everywhere. This is why if someone asks me what I consider, what my philosophy is that truth cannot be contained in language. Language is just a technology, inner technology we're using. Like the user of the technology is not the technology. When you drive your car, you're not your car, Voltaire, let's see what else he says. Voltaire says we are rarely proud when we are alone, and that is not true. But I can totally see how it's something universal. Voltaire says a witty saying proves nothing. Voltaire says man is free at the moment when he wishes to be. Voltaire says think of yourselves and let others enjoy the privilege to do so too. Voltaire says we have a natural right to make use of our pens as of our tongue, at our peril, risk, and hazard. Voltaire says what most persons consider as virtue after the age of 40 is simply a loss of energy. Voltaire says common sense is not so common. Voltaire says love is a canvas furnished by nature and embroidered by imagination. What an incredible sentence. As if the canvas is the moment, nature is the true self, and imagination is the allowance of the self. Voltaire says it's lamentable that to be a good patriot one must become the enemy of the rest of mankind. Wow. Voltaire says when it is a question of money, everybody is of the same religion. What is tolerance? It is the consequence of humanity. We are all formed of frailty and error. Let us pardon reciprocally each other's folly. That is the first law of nature. And Bertrand Russell even gave similar advice. Voltaire says, it is forbidden to kill. Therefore, all murderers are punished unless they kill in large numbers and to the sound of trumpets. Wow. Voltaire says, I am very fond of truth, but not at all of martyrdom. Voltaire says, better is the enemy of good. Voltaire says it is one of the superstitions of the human mind to have imagined that virginity could be a virtue. Voltaire says the secret of being a bore is to tell everything. And this is true, guys, because in the performing arts, uh, design has to either the design has unknown dimensions, or when the design's unknown dimensions are known, either you got to jump to new unknown dimensions or you kind of remain there, you know. Voltaire says very often say what you will, a knave is only a fool. Voltaire says who serves his country well has no need of ancestors. Wow. Voltaire says change is a word void of sense. Nothing can exist without a cause. Voltaire says, I know many books which I have bored their readers, but I know of none which has done real evil. Voltaire says, life is thickly sown with thorns, and I know no other remedy than to pass quickly through them. The longer we dwell on our misfortunes, the greater is their power to harm us. Voltaire says, opinion has caused more trouble on this little earth than plagues or earthquakes. Voltaire says, I know many books which I have bored their readers. I know many books which have bored their readers, but I know of none which has done real evil. Voltaire says, to believe in God is impossible, not to believe in Him is absurd. Wow. Voltaire says, the world embarrasses me, and I cannot dream that this watch exists and has no watchmaker. Voltaire says originality is nothing but judicious imitation. The most original writers borrowed one from another. And I think the way he's wording it here is wrong. It's pretty much community growth, but in your inner realms. So when I kind of went to philosophy, it's like you can't hear an idea. And so for me, it was like when you try to look in the eyes of the scholar you're studying or the philosopher you're looking into, you're trying to see how that person saw. So I feel if the person is looking for something out of knowledge, they'll get defined by what they look at. But if they're just observing it as if you're walking in the park and looking at this flower and that philosopher, it's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's healthier that way, I think. I consider at least. So Voltaire says the public is a ferocious beast. One must either chain it or flee from it. Voltaire says tyrants have always some slight shade of virtue. They support the laws before destroying them. Voltaire says, I have never made but one prayer to God, a very short one. O Lord, make my enemies ridiculous, and God granted. He says, it is better to risk saving a guilty man than to condemn an innocent one. That one's a mystery to me. It is better to risk saving a guilty man than to condemn an innocent one. Is it against his cultural rebellious attitude? I don't know. Anyways, Voltaire says in general, the art of government consists of taking as much money as possible from one class of citizens to give to another. Wow. Voltaire says to hold a pen is to be at war. And guys, this war I find is the war of bringing forth the inner realms into the external when they have been denied for so long. That means it's like we got to treat our species as if we're on an island and we have to use the best technology at hand. And for now, it's communication and language. The Voltaire says, the Voltaire. Voltaire says the best government is a benevolent tyranny tempered by an occasional assassination. Okay. It seems politics was heavy back in the day. Voltaire says, indeed, history is nothing more than a tableau of crimes and misfortunes. Voltaire says, to succeed in the world, it is not enough to be stupid, you must also be well mannered. And guys, he's probably coming from a time where identities were being crafted artificially for the first time. So when you see, for example, in Italy, the whole libertine movement, the whole Casanova, Don Juan kind of activities that were going on in Europe, it's like this kind of mentality where human beings were realizing that they had conscious control of how their personhood would come across. And when two different minds communicate, there tends to be some sort of rhythmic harmonization in the moment. It's like we do that through our speech. So, two philosophers debating, it's as if them seeing the same picture, as if both of them agree with something. It's as if like two different rhythms, two different rivers have merged for a moment. Voltaire says, if God created us in his own image, we have more than reciprocated. Voltaire said it is said that the present is pregnant with the future. Voltaire says the instruction we find in books is like fire. We fetch it from our neighbors, kindle it at home, communicate it to others, and it becomes the property of all. And I think it's about the spreading of vision because I feel we evolutionary wise went through a long phase of just tribal gather kind of modes of living. So, what does that mean? That means we are defined with the collective identity of our community. The development of an advanced human community should be what, like, they should teach this to sociologists, like sociology students in university. What would an advanced civilization look like? That's one of the most incredible questions one can ask, I think, in this lifetime. Anyways, let's keep going. Voltaire says the safest course is to do nothing against one's conscience. With this secret, we can enjoy life and have no fear from death. Word. He says doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd. Use, do not abuse. Neither abstinence nor excess ever renders man happy. Voltaire says God gave us the gift of life. It is up to us to give ourselves the gift of living well. Voltaire says perfection is attained by slow degrees. It required the hand of time. Voltaire says we are full of weaknesses and errors. I read this one. Voltaire says we cannot always oblige, but we can always speak obligingly. Voltaire says he must be very ignorant, for he answers every question he is asked. True, but on another level, it's as if where else does the microphone exist? When else? Voltaire says the infinitely little have a pride infinitely great. He says, is there anyone so wise as to learn by the experience of others? Voltaire says, illusion is the first of all pleasures. Voltaire says, it is difficult to free fools from the chains they revere. Voltaire says, divorce is probably of nearly the same date as marriage. I believe, however, that marriage is some weeks the more ancient. Voltaire says, love has features which pierce all hearts. He wears a bandage which conceals the faults of those beloved. He has wings, he comes quickly and flies away the same. Voltaire Voltaire says friendship is the marriage of the soul, and this marriage is liable to divorce. Voltaire says the ancient Romans built their greatest masterpieces of architecture, their amphitheaters, for wild beasts to fight in. Voltaire says one great use of words is to hide our thoughts. Voltaire says he is a hard man who is only just, and a sad one who is only wise. Voltaire says, let us read and let us dance to amusements that will never do any harm to the world. Voltaire says, paradise was made for tender hearts, hell for loveless hearts. Wow. Love is true, a gate to paradise. Voltaire says, all styles are good except the tiresome kind. I'm going to read one more. Let's see. Um, Voltaire, okay, I'll read a few more. He says, he shines in the second rank who is eclipsed in the first. Fourth at the top, dregs at bottom, but the middle excellent. Voltaire says, he who has not the spirit of this age has all the misery of it. Voltaire says, he who is not just is severe, he who is not wise is sad. History is only the register of crimes and misfortunes. In every author, let us distinguish the man from his works. And please do, guys. Injustice in the end produces independence. It is the flash which appears, the thunderbolt will follow. It is the vain for the coward to flee, death follows close behind. It is only by defying it that the brave escape. Nature has always had more force than education. Society, therefore, is as ancient as the world. Voltaire says the ear is the avenue to the heart. And then Voltaire says, the first step, my son, which one makes in the world is the one on which depends the rest of our days. That means how you approach it, how your eyes open up to the world. Well, at least I find, Voltaire says, the flower style is not the unsuitable to public speeches or addresses, which amount only to compliment. The lighter beauties are in their place when there is nothing more solid to say, but the flowery style ought to be banished from a pleading, a sermon, or a didactic work. Didactic work. Yeah, so he's saying that we gotta be open to be wild in our speech, pretty much. I feel. Voltaire says the mouth obeys poorly when the heart murmurs. Voltaire says there are truths which are not for all men, nor for all times. Voltaire says this self love is the instrument of our preservation. It resembles the provision for the perpetuity of mankind. It is necessary, it is dear to us, it gives us pleasure, and we must conceal it. Voltaire says very learned women are to be found in the same manner as female warriors, but they are seldom or ever inventors. Voltaire says we cannot wish for that we know not. Voltaire says what a heavy burden is a name that has become too famous. It's like at that point, I think robots are going to be carrying the weight. Voltaire says, what then do you call your soul? What idea have you of it? You cannot of yourselves without revelation admit the existence within you of anything but a power unknown to you of feeling and thinking, and that is a breath of fresh air to hear, you know? You see, guys, French philosophers back in the day had similar perspectives, you know? I think they would, Voltaire would subscribe to the Mr.Within YouTube channel. The unknown is the fascination of the mind, and the known creature finds itself in the unknown. Excuse me. I don't know, guys. I think every person's life experiences when they practice any art form begin to pour through, and what mastery is doing the practice while your inner states are shifting while you do it, because then you're accumulating more experience. So imagine whatever. Like, let me tell you something interesting. I can do. I do sometimes. I first realized, now life is becoming more high speed. But in like I was born in 1991, and I can say patience was the battle. And so I suddenly realized like meditation gave me an ability to whenever, wherever I am, to be able to sit somewhere and just be. That's it. Just sit somewhere and just be endlessly. Do you know? It's as if I found a way that it's as if where time is being linear for you is the same place where your subjective realms can re-evoke your attention. Let me tell you something that happens. I feel the more we become aware of the space, the more our reflexes become instant. So I'm telling you, a lot of the handling of the physical body, whether you are an athlete listening to me or anybody working anywhere, just this is the thing that it has to do with alertness. And alertness means that it's as if there's this biological body is being treated as a projector. Okay? So what it means is that when you look at an intelligent creature, any intelligent creature in nature, any environment they go in, they look around, they scan. Now, human beings have been put in such patterns of kind of repetitive lifestyles that I feel we have lost sight of this scanning ability we have. And this scanning ability is kind of like, how somebody, imagine throwing a rock in a still pond and then watching the ripples fade. And it's as if from the point where the rock fell, all the ripples are scanning the surface of the pond, right? So it's like sometimes when I enter a room, I just look at the room. I just look at the design because like since my childhood, I was fascinated by design. It seemed to me design, the concept of just the form of something it was like it had a strange purity. For me, geometry is divine, you know? That means it's like, anyways, so this alertness is very crucial. And where does this alertness come? How does this alertness arise? This kind of alertness that it's another way of saying, like, okay, so in ancient mystical texts, there's this idea that the person, it's like now in modern times it was extracted this way, but they kind of interpret it as a person. It's like imagine in a certain mystical community back in the day, they didn't even it's like there was no denial of believing in the soul. Their ideology was that the soul should not be in the body. The soul should be outside of the body, governing the body, administering the body. It was like an esoteric metaphysical thought of like that level. And so so we see it's like, and I thought about it, and I thought about this whole new age community. I remember seeing this idea of astral projection, and I don't want to kind of deny anybody's reality out there, but I'm just saying in my perception it's as if like who is astral projecting, when that who is unknown, then there's a huge potential that any sort of image oriented simulation can collapse. So what I mean by that is that how I kind of saw that out of body was in a very hilarious way. So the halls of the school of thought that I walk in, my own personal school of thought, is that I don't see a personality to the soul. That means I don't see it, like it's like the transmigrating soul is still any sort of individual concept is not it. Do you know? The issue with desire is not that it's wrong to desire something. It's just that they cling you. They cling you to definitions outside of your own mind. They make you just see only your inner realm, so you stumble and you think it's karma. But anyways, this idea of the soul being out of body, I kind of, for me, a personal moment of what I consider to be a very okay. It was pretty much like I consider like what I would consider at that point like it was like enlightening. So what the experience was in 2011. I was sitting on a rock in the middle of a river, and I was looking at the river go forth. And in that moment, I suddenly, as I was seeing like a metaphor of the river going forth like time, like whatever I do in this life, good or bad, everything is moving forward and changing, you know? On that rock, for the first time, I was, you can say, suffering as an idea. And for the first time, I asked myself, who is looking through my eyes? Do I know who is looking through my eyes? And when I realized it's unknown, in that moment, it was as if I was the space. I can tell you when I say your mind is your whole moment, that whole moment is the whole body. So it's like that was the out of body I experienced, where it was actually the whole moment just being. Yeah, that concept is pretty much, you can say it's like part of, it's one side of the coin that will always be there. That means it's like you see in the new age community, people are acknowledging that some higher mind is coming through their body, and the dude feels like he's channeling like some alien or something. So, so what does that mean? That means the person is under the impression a higher mind has come into a body. So it's like a world has come into a self, into a body. A mind has come into a body. Now the other view is the reverse, literally seeing the reverse design of it, which is a body going into a mind, right? So certain scholars considered that we're actually not physical. We're all transcendentally evolving. All matter is evolving into this inconceivable mind, you know. When Terence McKenna said the transcendental object at the end of time, he termed it that way, but he noticed that there's this unknown gravitational pull. It's like a massive pull of of a black hole, you know. And so we are, as philosophers throughout the ages, they have noticed the event horizon of this black hole, and I'm telling you, the word for it is unknown, because knowledge is has been so strictly identified with the body and matter, you know. So the only way is like the unknown is getting the relaxation of it, you know. So you see, I'm not kind of saying that. I don't want to invalid, kind of suggest that it's invalid. The subjective realms, they're evocational, you know, and they have value based on how honest the person is in the moment with themselves. But the thing is that for me, I can't give a story to the soul, you know. That's the thing. I feel that so Jose, welcome to the chat. Good morning, guys. Jake, welcome to the chat. So, guys, here's the thing. I am not, uh, when I talk about multidimensionality, my framework is different. I'm not seeing like, you know, I just see objective realm, subjective realm. Literally, when I look in the moment, I'm like, what do I see? I see a body, and then there's this awareness. The awareness, it doesn't have shape, the body has shape, you know? So for me, this idea of a soul moving into another body or moving into many bodies, and I gotta charge my laptop because it's gonna die. Oh my god. Just a second, guys. Okay, so I just saved the life of this live stream, guys. So here's the thing. So Jose, I would say you're free as a human being. There's universal, you know, freedom of speech, and freedom of speech means freedom to envision. So you are, we can see it in any way. We can create any story about what the soul is doing and what it's not doing and what it can do. We can stretch the soul into the level of myth even. Do you know? But I am kind of noticing that while we're being object, biological objects to ourselves, we're also being a subject to ourselves. So I am saying, imagine you as a being got access to all bodies in existence, and you even remembered, you accessed a sort of universal memory where you remembered everything. You were as if the consciousness of all existence, you know? Now, the consciousness, imagine after you are everywhere, how can you be out of body or in body when your body has become the cosmos? So you see, the subjective realm is very malleable. You know, this is why I'm saying the civilization has been conditioned to be language worshippers, you know, and the scholarly, philosophical, rebellious nature of wondering what knowledge really is kind of, that flame is becoming dim. You know, that's the thing that I was kind of really inspired to speak about the educational system, that it's like the philosophers and the poets and the artists of the world are failing. They're failing us. And what does that mean? That means we have such a potential to build an actual beautiful civilization and society, but there is some invisible force field that is denying us. And that invisible force field is the selfishness we have to survive. So imagine everybody had everything they needed for their survival, 8 billion people. We would just, let's say some people would be inspired towards chaotic action, but we would see most people who are satisfied. Now, after you're physically satisfied, imagine we reached a level of abundance where nobody on the planet had to work a single day, any work anymore. Everybody had everything and it was good. Now, some people would be like, "Yo, man, it's like then what's the point of living? What's the point of this dull utopia?" I'll say this though, if it was something like that, we would perhaps move into a lifestyle of idea generation. We would, for the first time, move civilization into a comprehension that matter has turned into a thought to itself. It has evolved into a thought to itself. So for me, it doesn't get more spiritual than self and awareness becoming indistinguishable, inseparable. Creaturehood has to do with the world you see. And I have this firm consideration that a person cannot see an archetype without a world that archetype has found value. So imagine we say, for example, somebody sees, for example, a mother bear take care of her cub, and they suddenly remember the archetype of their own mother. Or you see like old bear, and you remember the archetype of your grandfather or something. So that archetype of your grandfather or even your ancestor, it doesn't exist alone. The uniqueness of its detail, how that archetype is sculpted, is based on actually how the world is kept separate to it. So a sense of self cannot exist without a world, and if it exists, it is not a self, it is a field. We have to get the species prepared for the potential that extraterrestrial contact is behind our eyes first, maybe. Maybe it's us becoming acquainted that life can be lived in a collective, harmonious way. Because you look at birds and you see birds, in some sense, they fly together. You see fish, they swim together. Lions have their pride. Wolves run together, even. You know? Bees swarm together. So it's this kind of thing that species of the same design can tap into some sort of collective rhythm. Now, language and art and creativity and media and all this has been catalyzing this, but it has not been catalyzing it to a good aim. Because the civilization, it doesn't have a vision for itself, it just has a maintenance program. And a civilization that is not updating to the fastest potential is really a civilization in habitual decay. So for me, guys, when I say the soul, like in Vedanta, there was this concept of the horses were the body, the chariot driver was the mind, and the one in the chariot was the soul. And when the mind lost control and alertness, imagine the chariot driver got lost control of the horses. Imagine a human being who's suddenly in some physical turbulence, right? So in that moment, it's as if the mind is required. So any person who has a problem, guess what? Your mind is part of the equation. I feel the winds of evolution, which is hopefully, guys, this will be a YouTube channel where I'd have access to a whiteboard. I'm trying to set that up. Feel free to support me on Patreon so I can get the whiteboard soon. But anyways, this notion of the winds of evolution, that it's as if man's art is strangely being taken back to nature. And from the isolation of our inner realms, the only way out is through the realization of the collectivity of the outer. I'm pretty much saying, like, some people may be like, yo, you can't be this intense. But I'm like, there's a huge need to go to every child, every parent telling their child, listen, kid, we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And we need to live in an advanced civilization and continue the flame of humanity. Now go study whatever you want. Go whatever path you want, but whatever you do, care for the civilization you're leaving behind. It's as if you can say parents by um, uh, passing down collective responsibility to their children are in some sense assuring that their grandkids are treated right. It's the ultimate care of the parent. So, by the way, guys, so Jake, I saw your comment about natural evolution. Just to say something, guys, I've pretty much decided to put all my effort and attention in using the computer on just two things: writing and sharing content on like these YouTube talks, and pretty much sharing videos or very unique kind of things that I feel throughout the day. Pretty much, it's like this. I go through a lot of content sometimes, and I share all that in the Patreon. You know, so check it out, and if you want to be a part of that, I you know, welcome to School of Athens 2.0. By the way, guys, in Patreon, I'm gonna soon release certain science fiction stories to that community specifically because it's honestly like a safe, good community. Like I trust Patreon. For me, it's one of those like websites to honor in history. So, anyways, that's the thing, guys. It's like we're looking at something, and what should we do with this energy that we have? We consciously direct it to the most efficient vision. And that is key, guys. Efficient vision. There was a time in my life where I was a man with a plan, running around trying to find some sort of kingdom to rule. And then I broke. Simply said, I broke. What that means is the archetype broke. Something experientially happened that the value system was no longer there. My desires seemed like dead weight. And when that moment happened, I realized that regardless of what I want physically, there is a mystery here. There is a mystery of consciousness that only the philosophers were intellectually brave enough to try to attempt to, get as close to this black hole of the mystery of conscious use of language, that the situation we find ourselves in. When I say making sense of creaturehood, it's another way of saying that the world developed the conditions for a unique sensory oriented design to appear. By the way, guys, I need a quick intermission. I'll be back. So I'm back, guys. Thanks for waiting. So good morning, everyone. Let's see. I guess an idea I can share is this idea. It's a recent idea I've developed, but I think it's good enough to share. It's this idea of an elemental unit. Now, hear me out what I mean by this. So I have this whole vision of civilization 2.0 to be this civilization that is actually living in the orbit. All right, guys. Sorry, this thing was. I can't believe like this thing was on mute and I was talking. Anyways, a quick recap, in case I don't know where it cut off, but here. Pretty much, I'm saying if there was an alien invasion, humanity had to unite. If humanity had to unite, the educational system would be preparing us for that confrontation. The way it has, when we look at the educational system in the 1900s, it was designed for soldiers taking information from one bunker to another. So pretty much this whole strict sort of examination and proof of result thing system that's going on, you know. So similarly, when I wondered about if we were under like an alien invasion, what would the educational curriculum be? It's really this kind of notion that I would feel that people have to get into the elemental groups, and groups of five are gonna save the world, and at the end they can all high five. We are, if I was to be a bit brutally honest, a species caught in language games that can endlessly give purpose to objectivity. I feel the unknown is a requirement for the evolution of experience, the confrontation of the unknown. That means the educational system is considering it knows something and it feels it has to give that knowledge to the person entering the educational system. But what if the educational system suddenly, as Buckminster Fuller saw the concept of God, change from a noun to a verb? You know, what if, as Alfred Whitehead kind of saw particles suddenly becoming a process, as if man was no longer just random atoms in the middle of nowhere. He was a process of nature, the process of the mind of nature, you know, the hidden mind of nature, where I can say Spinoza's God is suggested to have, been hiding. So, anyways, um, the educational system, if it was a verb, if it was a process, could be said to be an educational system that its focus is on skill evolution and skill advancement and creativity, rhythmic abidance. You see, human beings, what can we do? We can either speak, make sound noises, or physically express ourselves. Now, if you think about, all right, so where does that physical expression, what's the peak evolution of that, and what's the peak evolution of communication? So when I came and saw communication, I was, the peak evolution of communication is advanced communication. And what's advanced communication? The relay time between the communicator. It's as if the message and the message the messenger, the message and the message receiver are the same moment, or it's instant. So for me, it's this idea of kind of, you have to feel engaged. The whole problem of reality is the isolation of survival. You know, survival of the fittest may be true, but nowhere did it say survival of the isolated fittest. You know, and I feel that's the whole point of civilization. Our ancestors died in wars so we could give podcast talks, you know. So this is something crucial, and the responsibility of the modern times must have the same intensity as your ancestor picking up a sword and running into the battlefield. But now we're running into the battlefields of the minds. We're becoming hunter gatherers of the inner realms. And if you really think about it, if we were to rewind civilization currently, we can totally see a wave of automation is going to hit. That means I was thinking industrious the world will become. Because if you think about it, robots are cheaper than humans and they work 24/7, you know? So I suddenly saw, oh my God, in 100 years, nobody has a job and everybody is complaining about finding a job. you know? So it's as if the system is designed in a way where perhaps in 100 years the need for human labor is going to go extinct. So at that point we have no choice but to live as minds. So right now, as I'm kind of giving this talk, I'm saying like that's the ability of becoming sensitive to our subjective realms, because anything you have an opinion on, you stop seeing it grow and change. Anything you hold too strict of a belief on, you have suddenly deviated from nature. So I find that the inspiration for fantasy, or where mythological gods live, or the genre that mythological gods live in, I feel it's just emergence of attention. This attention concentrates on a phenomena, just like the Transformer movie copies itself. As it copies itself, it realizes it can have various access to various subjective senses of self. When the mind is experiencing, can we say that the earth is rotating the wrong way? So our senses developed to a point where a character in a story relationship again came about. This character in a story relationship is where modern civilization is at currently. Do you know? We're all trying to be something. We're all trying to be somebody. We're all trying to get by. And what this really means is that because the resource allocation is inefficient, in some sense, people are like, gosh, it's hard. Do you know? You see, check this out. Look at where the world's heading. I mean, I can't believe more people don't have opinions on this. Like, and it's this thing where health wise, there is a decrease, and technological wise, there's an increase. And the more technological wise there's an increase, and the more unhealthier we are, the more technology is doing the work for us. So the more we are being pulled into lifestyles where we're dependent on technology. And the ultimate dependence of technology will be immortality, trying to attain immortality. Now, I find that nature is a storyteller, and once the story is finished, the storyteller leaves, and if the person is still in the room, it's like, what are you doing? So, I don't know. It's just it's this idea that, like, when a writer writes a world, creates a narrative world, it's kind of like the same way a person writes their diary. It's like they're a character in a world, you know? And so that relationship is very crucial to study. And I feel psychology's doors are being open to the need, because when you look at psychologists, they're trying to get statistics. You know, I think the psychologist's dream is everybody to participate. Mind of man is a world generator, and the world generated directs the attention. So I had this idea that in Civilization 2.0, I feel now is a good time to share it. Pretty much, it's my idea of a yin yang civilization, and I kind of say it's like it has three phases. Phase one all resources. First of all, the mind is valued as the highest resource, but grander than anything. It's like the mind of a human being is priceless, so we must defend the mind of every living being, or at least make sure we're defending the minds of all human beings. you know that means that's something I like about the response system, emergency response system in American culture, that it's like it's more than needed, and that sometimes is a good response system, maybe not socially too much, but like internally in regards to the philosophical approach. Do you know that it's as if we go with intensity towards the aim? So, civilization 2.0, first idea, let's think about what's going on. We're on a rock which we experience like a flat plane. It's like that's one weird thing about life. Now, this flat plane appearance of spherical Earth, this sphere that we're on, very clearly I'm going to say, because I don't know who's listening, but this sphere, this sphere that we're on, pretty much look at what's going on. Because we've chosen to be territorial tribes and kingdoms, like nations are like kingdoms, guys. Come on. Who we joking? They're like kingdoms. It's like Game of Thrones everywhere. Game of Thrones is a perfect reflection of global politics. But but the thing is, guys, this is the idea. Because we've been territorial, we've taken ownership of the land. Resources have been limited to borders. Okay, so what does that mean? That means because we're living on the surface of the earth, we have limited each nation, each kingdom, each nation's access, to the resources. Now imagine a civilization that was suddenly got this idea. Whoa, whoa, whoa! If we lived in the orbit of our civilization, okay, if we lived, if we lived in the orbit, I'm laughing at the comments. But if we lived in the if we lived in the orbit of civilized if our advanced civilization was in the orbit, first of all, the Earth would be like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's like we'll be like, oh my God, we need resources, for the hungry that are living in our sky cities, and we'll be like, oh my God, the Earth has become an endless resource. It is our abstract ownership that is causing the inefficiency of it. Now, it doesn't mean this ownership should go away, but it just it's a suggestion of like pretty much when the civilization is in the air and all the funds have gone in trying to build sky cities or pretty much make civilization into some sort of a spaceship. I have a perfect reasoning for that, and I'll share it in a sec in a deeper way, but I'll say this. Phase one, civilization got into the air. While the civilization is in the air, Earth is phase two begins. Phase two of civilization 2.0 is to replant the Earth. Pretty much let Earth heal itself into a heaven, and it's pretty much going to be all the ethnobotanists, all the people who have been researching and studying plant life. It'll be their moment to shine, to find the quickest way we can make Earth seem like an uninhabited planet, like an uninhabited paradise of a planet. So while we're living in our orbits, in the atmosphere, I haven't per se studied this precisely, but I feel just an intuitive feeling that there is a level of our atmosphere before it gets to outer space where it's kind of clear, you know? Yeah, I don't know the potential of living in the atmosphere, but maybe I don't know about the distance of the sky city. Again, that's something for the future. The future can solve easily. But so, um, so guys in the chat section, CS, I'm not sure what you're referring to. But anyways, let me just catch this train of thought, guys. Civilization 2.0 phase 1 complete. We're in the sky. Phase 2, we planted the earth into a heaven. We made earth into we built paradise on earth, or turned the earth into a paradise. Phase 2 complete. Phase 3 would now be studying why we came into the air, and it would be going into the deeper dimensions of our character, how even if we were on the earth, we would probably be using up all the resources of the earth to get lost in digital cyberspace. I'm telling you, we can experience cyberspace in the orbit. And so, cyberspace realities that may that may kind of not trap but disturb perception of the being, you know. So what I'm saying is humanity doesn't have earthly union. Like when you see the Wall Street guy, like he walks over an ant as if the ant is like a rock. You know what I mean? Like it's like there's no value. So I'm telling you, it's this kind of mentality of being insensitive to what is not what one doesn't want. You know, saying the logos kind of intuitively, I kind of learned learned. It was phase 3 would probably be have two sides to it: an inner technological revolution and an outer technological revolution. The inner technological revolution would be the exploration of the edge bounds of cyberspace. The vision is to live 2,000 years in our orbit until the Earth is healed. And during that time we're living in our orbit, not only is that a super cool event for people, you know, for human beings, but it's also the safest way, you know, that we can in some sense have a backup plan. So by living in our orbit, we make our planet our own backup plan, and we think of becoming interstellar through our sky cities as humanity. Phase 3 would have an interstellar vision. And the cool thing is, right now, we see different professions, okay? But I feel the civilization will get so advanced that pretty much the standard, the polymath would be the average child. Pretty much a person so wondrous about the environment they're in, their intelligence, not their intelligence, their attention fearlessly walks through the forest of conception. I don't know what it is, guys. I think it comes down to perhaps personal taste. What the Medici family decided to make civilization beautiful, and we have to make the sky cities beautiful. What does that mean? That means two technologies come on the top of the list of the most important to advance. First technology is that any technology that can help build the sky city. That means if you're a billionaire out there, or one, I don't know one day how far I will be on this earth or what I will accumulate, but I have this vision that there should be incredible, like in mathematics, how there were the Millennium questions, where there were theorems that if answered, the person would get $1 million. It would be about all the questions of anybody who can find a way to build a sky city will get $1 million. Do you know how many people are going to run towards education? Do you know the whole problem of the educational system is hilarious? It's like people they it's as if we're given freedom, but our survival depends on sacrificing that freedom for the discipline of the institutionalized kind of concrete jungle. So it's as if, like, how can I tell you, um, there was a dervish quote, Sufi dervish quote, where the quote was something like, first of all, the enlightenment was the concept of the pearl. And the quote said that the pearl is the one who has the pearl. Pretty much the guy who has the pearl, who's enlightened, is not enlightened in the mountain. The one who has the pearl in the mountain is not the one who really has the pearl. It's the one who has it in the busy marketplace. That means we're pretty much kind of states of our own mind, and ultimately means our free will is governing our discipline. Many people concept of discipline because they feel it takes freedom away. But let me tell you, it's as if it doesn't take freedom away, it's the freedom in another dimension. Right now, we have gone into the era of advanced communication. So, and I forgot, the inner technology is language. So, pretty much the focus of the educational system should be on evolving the relationship of language and experience, and pretty much all children will most likely be kind of like seen as either a, what was the name? Let me just find this guys for a second. It's as if, like, the difference between continental philosophers and analytical philosophers, that there was the unknown experiential component of language alive for the continental. It was as if the continental philosophers dared share more of the mystery. The analytical philosophers focused on the known, the continental philosophers focused on the unknown. And when you look at the personality of children, you can totally see where their attention is. That means, for example, the child that takes care of itself, that child, their attention is on the known. That child that's just having fun, it's like a being that has entered this world and its attention is just on the unknown, you know? And it's as if, like, how can I tell you? in a strange way, if we didn't have any opinion on life, it would still happen. And that's the cool thing about it, you know. Exactly. So Jake, so guys, Jake in the chat section said living in the orbit and living with a view of the entire Earth out of the window would give humanity some much needed perspective. Exactly. So, anyways, guys, recently I felt that I'm gonna probably like focus on writing and hopefully in the Patreon section, I will show. How can I tell you? I've thought about publishing like legit, like an official first book. And there's so many titles I have, so many books. And I don't want to say so many books. It's like, how can I tell you? Books for me, there are like, it's like artwork in a museum of your own creation. You know? So what that means is you care for all of them in their own place. So I've kind of had this inability. I don't I, like I have I can't decide which book to give out. That's pretty much the thing. And so I think I'm gonna focus on trying to solve that puzzle. And anyways, thanks for listening, guys. I hope this talk was helpful. The ultimatum is either at the end of phase 3 of civilization 2.0, we are ready to return back to Earth and Earth is paradise like, or we have become interstellar and Earth is just our headquarters. So you see, it's like being an interstellar civilization, we can still be it by being in the sky cities, you know. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings. And one thing I want to say, encourage anybody who's listening to this, please, please find one moment throughout the day where you can just look at how the day has happened and see if you can put it into a sentence and write it. And write only for yourself. I'm telling you, that's the secret, uh, that you realize your the eyes are allowed to be here, and that is an innate value. So when you write, you're not writing it just for man. You're writing for the cosmos. You're writing. Your audience is every phenomenological possibility. So, anyways, in other words, you know, Aerosmith would say "Dream on," Mr. Within would say "Right on." All right, have a good day, guys.